There's a moment that arrives without warning. You're sitting in your living room, scrolling through your phone, and suddenly the walls feel too close. The life you've built feels like borrowed clothes that no longer fit. Your soul whispers something your mind can't quite grasp, but your body knows. It's time for something different. Not better, different. Like you need to step sideways into a version of reality that's been waiting for you all along. Most people dismiss this feeling. They rationalize it away, convince themselves it's just stress or boredom or some midlife crisis they read about online. But what if that restlessness isn't a problem to solve? What if it's intelligence trying to communicate? What if your consciousness, that mysterious force that scientists still can't fully explain, is picking up signals from possibilities that exist beyond your current experience? Welcome to the edge of what we know about reality itself, because today we're diving into something that sounds like science fiction, but is rooted in quantum physics. Something that challenges every assumption you've ever had about how change happens and what's actually possible for a human being who's willing to think beyond the boundaries of conventional wisdom. Here's what they don't tell you in school. Reality isn't as solid as it appears. At the quantum level, particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observation collapses them into a single outcome. This isn't philosophy. This is measurable science. And if the building blocks of everything you see around you can exist in multiple states at once, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for the life you're living right now compared to all the lives you could be living? The concept we're exploring today has been whispered about in mystery schools for centuries, studied in laboratories by Nobel Prize winners, and experienced by ordinary people who stumbled into extraordinary shifts without understanding the mechanics behind what happened to them. It's called quantum jumping, and it's not what you think it is. This isn't about positive thinking your way to success. This isn't about vision boards or affirmations or trying to manifest a better parking spot. What we're talking about is something far more precise and far more radical. It's about understanding that you as a conscious being exist across multiple timelines simultaneously. And with the right knowledge, the right approach, the right energetic alignment, you can shift your awareness from one timeline to another. Think about the last time something in your life changed dramatically. Not gradually, not through months of effort, but suddenly. One day you were in a relationship that felt stuck, and then something shifted and it was over. One day you were working a job that drained your soul, and then an opportunity appeared that changed everything. One day you felt trapped by circumstances, and then somehow you found yourself free. Most people call these moments luck or coincidence or divine intervention. But what if there's a pattern? What if these sudden shifts follow laws as predictable as gravity or electromagnetism? What if you could learn to navigate these transitions consciously instead of waiting for life to push you into them? In quantum mechanics, when an electron absorbs enough energy, it doesn't gradually move from one orbital to another. It disappears from its current position and instantly appears in a new one. No journey through space. No transition period. One moment it's here, the next moment it's there. Scientists call this a quantum leap, and it happens billions of times per second in your body right now. Your consciousness operates on similar principles. When you align with a different frequency of experience, when you embody a different version of yourself with enough coherence and consistency, reality reorganizes around that new signal. Not slowly, not gradually, instantaneously, because at the deepest level, all possibilities already exist. You're not creating anything new, you're tuning into what's already there. But here's where most people get confused. They think quantum jumping means visualizing a better life and waiting for it to show up. They think it's about setting intentions and hoping the universe delivers. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Real quantum jumping requires something most people aren't prepared for. It requires you to become someone different at the identity level. Not to get something, but to be something. And that means letting go of the version of yourself that created your current reality. All of it. The stories, the patterns, the emotional habits, the ways you've learned to cope and survive and make sense of the world. This is where it gets uncomfortable, because change at this level doesn't feel like improvement. It feels like death. The death of who you thought you were. The death of what you thought was possible. The death of the comfortable prison you've spent years perfecting. And most people, when they feel this dissolution beginning, they panic. They grab onto the familiar. They convince themselves they were being unrealistic. They settle back into the known patterns because unknown freedom feels more terrifying than familiar limitation. But what if you didn't run? What if you understood that this dissolution isn't destruction, it's preparation? What if you knew that every caterpillar must become soup before it becomes a butterfly, and that the soup stage isn't failure, it's transformation in its most powerful form? The techniques we're going to explore in this series aren't about adding something to your life. They're about subtracting everything that isn't aligned with the timeline you're choosing to access. They're about becoming so clear about who you are at the deepest level that reality has no choice but to reflect that clarity back to you. This might sound abstract right now, but by the time we're finished, you'll have practical tools you can use immediately. You'll understand the science behind why certain approaches work and others don't. You'll know how to recognize when you're ready for a jump and how to navigate the transition without losing your center. More importantly, you'll understand that you're not at the mercy of circumstances. You're not stuck with the life you've accidentally created through unconscious choices and inherited patterns. You have access to timelines where your dreams aren't dreams anymore, they're just Tuesday afternoon. But first, we need to address the elephant in the room. Why don't more people know about this? Why isn't quantum jumping taught in schools or discussed in mainstream media? The answer is simpler than you might think. Because it requires something our culture doesn't value. It requires you to trust your inner knowing more than external authority. It requires you to believe in possibilities that can't be proven until after you've already leaped. In the next part of this series, we're going to dive deep into the mechanics of how this actually works. You'll learn about the relationship between consciousness and quantum fields. You'll understand why your emotional state is the key to accessing different timelines. And you'll discover the first practical technique you can use to begin shifting your reality tonight. But before we go there, I want you to consider something. Right now, as you're listening to these words, multiple versions of you exist across infinite timelines. There's a version of you that made different choices, took different risks, trusted different instincts. There's a version of you that's already living the life you dream about. That version isn't separate from you. It's not in some distant dimension you can never reach. It's available right now, in this moment, if you're willing to become the person who would naturally live that life. The question isn't whether quantum jumping is real. The question is whether you're ready to discover what becomes possible when you stop limiting yourself to one timeline and start consciously choosing which reality you want to experience. Stay with me, because what we're about to explore will challenge everything you thought you knew about change, growth, and what it means to be human in a quantum universe. The mechanics of quantum jumping aren't complicated, but they are precise. And precision matters because we're dealing with laws that operate whether you understand them or not. Think of it like learning to drive. The car doesn't care if you know how the engine works, but if you want to get where you're going without crashing, you need to understand which pedal does what. So let's break this down. Every thought you think creates an electromagnetic signature. Every emotion you feel generates measurable patterns in your heart and brain. When these signals align, when your thoughts and feelings point in the same direction, you create what scientists call coherence. And coherence is the key that unlocks different timelines. But here's where most people get it wrong. They try to think their way into a new reality. They visualize and affirm and meditate on what they want, all while their nervous system remains locked in the patterns of who they've always been. It's like trying to tune a radio to a new station while someone else keeps moving the dial back to static. Your nervous system is your broadcast tower. It's constantly sending signals about who you are, what you expect, what you believe is possible. And the quantum field responds to that signal with mathematical precision. Not to your words, not to your hopes, to your authentic energetic signature. This is why positive thinking alone rarely creates lasting change. You can repeat affirmations all day, but if your body is still carrying the stress patterns of limitation, if your breath is still shallow with anxiety, if your posture still reflects defeat, then that's the signal you're broadcasting. And that's what gets reflected back to you. Real quantum jumping begins with nervous system coherence. It begins with training your body to embody the frequency of the timeline you want to access. Not occasionally, not when you feel inspired, consistently, until that frequency becomes your new baseline. Here's what this looks like in practice. When you wake up tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before you let the world tell you who you should be today, you're going to make a choice. You're going to ask yourself one simple question: who am I choosing to be right now? Not who you were yesterday, not who others expect you to be, who you are choosing to embody in this moment. And then you're going to breathe that choice into your cells. You're going to feel it in your chest, your shoulders, your spine. You're going to let your entire nervous system reorganize around that decision. This isn't visualization. This is embodiment. There's a difference. Visualization happens in your head. Embodiment happens in your biology. When you truly embody a new frequency, your heart rate changes, your breathing deepens, your muscles relax or energize in different patterns. Your brain waves shift into new configurations. And here's the beautiful part. Once your nervous system locks into a new frequency, maintaining it becomes effortless. It's like finding the right current in a river. You stop fighting the flow and start moving with it. Decisions become clearer. Actions feel more natural. The right opportunities seem to appear at exactly the right time. But let's be honest about what happens next, because this is where most people abort the process without realizing it. You start embodying a new frequency, you feel different, more confident, more peaceful, more alive. And then your mind kicks in with its favorite question. Where's the proof? Where are the results? Why hasn't everything changed yet? The moment you start looking for evidence, you've stepped out of embodiment and back into doubt. You've switched from transmitting your new frequency to scanning for validation of your old patterns. And the quantum field responds accordingly. It gives you more doubt to validate. This is the paradox that stops most people. They think they need to see the change before they can believe it's real. But quantum jumping works in reverse. You have to embody the new reality so completely that seeing the old one becomes impossible. You have to become so aligned with your chosen timeline that reality has no choice but to catch up. Think about it this way. If you're watching a movie and you don't like the story, you don't try to change what's happening on the screen. You change the channel. The screen itself isn't the problem. The signal is the problem. And you are both the broadcaster and the receiver of your reality signal. Most people spend their lives trying to rearrange the external circumstances while broadcasting the same internal frequency. They want different results from the same signal, but that's not how broadcasting works. If you want to watch a different show, you have to tune to a different channel. The channel you're tuned to right now was set by years of unconscious choices. The thoughts you've repeated, the emotions you've practiced, the stories you've told yourself about what's possible and what isn't. All of these created the frequency you're currently broadcasting, and your current life is simply that frequency made visible. But here's what gives me hope. Here's what should give you hope. Frequency can be changed instantly, not gradually, not through years of therapy or decades of discipline. In a single moment of authentic choice, you can tune to an entirely different channel. The question is, are you willing to stop being the person who needs things to be different in order to feel whole? Are you ready to become the person who already is whole and therefore attracts experiences that reflect that wholeness? This isn't about pretending everything is perfect. This isn't about spiritual bypassing or positive thinking your way out of real challenges. This is about recognizing that your relationship to those challenges is what determines whether they become stepping stones or stumbling blocks. When you embody the frequency of someone who sees opportunities instead of obstacles, you literally begin to perceive different aspects of the same situation. The facts don't change. Your interpretation of the facts transforms, and your interpretation shapes your response, and your response creates your next experience. This is how timelines shift. Not through dramatic external events, but through subtle internal reorientations that compound over time. Each moment you choose to embody your next level self instead of defending your current level limitations, you're making a quantum jump. Small perhaps, but real. And these small jumps accumulate, they build momentum. They create a trajectory that eventually becomes undeniable, even to the most skeptical parts of your mind. Because results follow frequency with the same reliability that plants follow sunlight. In the next section, we're going to explore the specific techniques that make this process practical and repeatable. You'll learn how to identify which frequency you're currently broadcasting, how to shift it consciously, and how to maintain your new signal even when the old patterns try to pull you back. Because knowing the theory is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you start applying these principles consistently, when you make quantum jumping not just a concept you understand, but a skill you've mastered. The most dangerous moment in any transformation isn't when you're struggling, it's when you're succeeding. Because success at this level threatens every identity you've ever held about who you are and what you deserve. And your mind, brilliant as it is, will do everything in its power to pull you back to familiar ground. This is what I call the coherence collapse. You've been practicing embodying your new frequency. Your nervous system has started to stabilize in this elevated state. People around you are beginning to notice something different about your energy. Opportunities are starting to show up that match your new signal. And then, without warning, doubt crashes in like a tidal wave. Maybe it's a conversation with someone from your past who reminds you of all the times you've tried to change before. Maybe it's a moment of silence where the old anxiety creeps back in. Maybe it's just waking up one morning and feeling like you were fooling yourself. Like this whole quantum jumping thing is just elaborate self-deception. Here's what you need to understand. This isn't failure, this is feedback. The quantum field is testing the stability of your new frequency. Not to punish you, but to see if you're really committed to this new timeline or if you're just visiting. Most people interpret this test as evidence that the process isn't working. They feel the doubt and think, see, I knew this was too good to be true. But doubt isn't the opposite of faith. Doubt is the guardian at the threshold between timelines. It's asking one simple question. Are you sure you want to leave behind everything you've known for something you can't yet fully see? Your answer to that question determines whether you collapse back into your old patterns or anchor more deeply into your chosen reality. And here's the crucial part. You don't answer with words. You answer with embodiment. You feel the doubt, acknowledge it, and then consciously return to your new frequency anyway. This is where technique becomes essential, because when the emotional storm hits, you need something more reliable than willpower. You need a protocol that works regardless of how you feel in the moment. The first technique is what I call the frequency anchor. Right now, while you're feeling stable and clear, I want you to identify 3 physical sensations that accompany your elevated state. Maybe it's the way your shoulders relax when you're embodying confidence. Maybe it's the deeper breathing that happens when you feel aligned. Maybe it's the subtle warmth in your chest when you're connected to your purpose. These physical markers become your anchor points. When doubt arises, when the old patterns try to pull you back, you don't fight the mental chatter. You simply return to these physical sensations. You breathe deeper, you soften your shoulders, you generate that warmth in your chest, and your nervous system remembers, oh yes, this is who we are now. The second technique addresses the story your mind tells when change feels too fast or too good to be true. Instead of arguing with these thoughts, you're going to redirect them. When your mind says this can't be real, you're going to ask a different question. What if it is real, and I'm just not used to things working out for me? This isn't positive thinking. This is perspective shifting. You're not denying the doubt. You're opening to a possibility your mind hasn't considered. That maybe your new reality feels strange, not because it's wrong, but because you've been living in limitation for so long that expansion feels foreign. The third technique is the most counterintuitive, and it's the one that separates quantum jumpers from quantum wishers. When you feel yourself being pulled back toward old patterns instead of resisting, you're going to get curious. You're going to ask, what is this old energy trying to protect me from? Because here's what most people don't realize. Your limitations aren't just random. They developed for reasons, they served purposes. Maybe staying small kept you safe from criticism. Maybe avoiding success protected you from the responsibility that comes with power. Maybe maintaining struggle gave you a sense of identity or connection with others who were also struggling. When you honor the positive intention behind your limitations, instead of just trying to bulldoze through them, something magical happens. The energy that was locked up in resistance becomes available for transformation. You're not fighting yourself anymore. You're integrating yourself. This integration process looks different for everyone, but it always involves the same core principle. You stop making your old patterns wrong and start making your new patterns more attractive. You don't eliminate doubt. You become someone for whom doubt is just one voice among many, and not the loudest one. But let's get practical about what this looks like day to day. Because quantum jumping isn't something you do once and then coast. It's a moment-by-moment choice to align with the frequency of your chosen timeline. Every morning before your feet hit the floor, you're going to take 30 seconds to tune in. Not to plan your day or review your problems, but to connect with the version of yourself you're choosing to embody. You're going to feel that frequency in your body. You're going to let it inform your posture, your breathing, your intention for the day. Throughout the day, whenever you notice yourself slipping back into old patterns, you're going to use what I call the reset breath. One deep inhale where you gather up all the scattered energy of worry or doubt or limitation. And one long exhale where you release it completely and return to your chosen frequency. This isn't about being perfect. This isn't about never feeling negative emotions or never having moments of uncertainty. This is about developing the skill to return to your center more quickly. Instead of spending hours or days in old patterns, you spend minutes. Instead of needing external circumstances to change before you can feel good, you become the source of your own stability. And here's what starts to happen when you practice this consistently. The gap between your internal shift and external reflection begins to close. The quantum field starts responding more quickly to your new signal. Synchronicities increase. The right people show up at the right time. Obstacles that once seemed insurmountable begin to dissolve. But more importantly, you stop needing these external validations to know that the process is working. You start to trust your own experience. You develop what I call quantum confidence, the unshakable knowing that you are the author of your reality, regardless of what anyone else thinks or believes. This confidence isn't arrogance. It's not about thinking you're better than anyone else. It's about recognizing that you have the same creative power as every other conscious being. You've just learned how to use it deliberately instead of accidentally. And when you reach that level of inner knowing, when you stop looking outside yourself for permission to be extraordinary, that's when the real magic begins. That's when you discover that quantum jumping isn't just a technique for changing your circumstances, it's a way of living that keeps you in constant alignment with your highest potential. In our final section, we're going to explore what happens when this becomes your new normal. When jumping between timelines isn't something you do occasionally, but something you navigate as naturally as breathing. Because that's where this journey ultimately leads. Not to a destination, but to a way of being that transforms every moment into an opportunity for conscious evolution. Here's the truth about living as a quantum jumper. It doesn't look the way most people imagine. There's no constant state of bliss, no dramatic daily miracles, no feeling like you've transcended the human experience. What actually happens is far more subtle and infinitely more powerful. You begin to live in a state of relaxed readiness. Like a surfer who's learned to read the waves, you develop an intuitive sense of when a shift is available. You feel it before your mind understands it. A quiet restlessness that isn't dissatisfaction, but anticipation. Your field preparing to reorganize around a new possibility. Most people spend their entire lives reacting to circumstances. Something happens, they respond. Someone says something, they defend. Life pushes, they push back. But when you master quantum navigation, you start living from cause instead of effect. You sense the shift before it manifests. You align with the timeline before it becomes obvious. This is where the real artistry begins, because timing matters in quantum jumping. Not the forced timing of impatience, but the organic timing of alignment. There are moments when the field is more malleable, when reality is more responsive to conscious intention. Learning to recognize these windows is like learning to catch the perfect wave. You'll notice certain patterns. After periods of intense growth, there's often a plateau where integration happens. During major life transitions, the boundaries between timelines become thinner. In moments of deep presence, when you're completely absorbed in something you love, the field becomes more responsive to subtle shifts in intention. But here's what surprised me most about this journey. The biggest jumps don't happen when you're trying to escape something. They happen when you're so aligned with who you're becoming that staying where you are becomes energetically impossible. It's not push, it's pull. The new timeline draws you forward because you've become a vibrational match for it. This is why forcing never works in quantum jumping. Force implies resistance, and resistance creates static in your signal. When you try to make something happen, you're broadcasting the frequency of effort, struggle, not having. And the field responds with more circumstances that require effort and struggle. True mastery looks like surrender, but it's not passive surrender. It's active alignment. You become so clear about the frequency you want to embody that you stop needing specific outcomes. You trust that any result aligned with your chosen frequency will serve your highest good, even if it doesn't match what your mind thought it wanted. This trust isn't naive optimism. It's based on understanding how the system actually works. When you consistently broadcast coherence, love, creativity, abundance, the field must respond with experiences that match those frequencies. Not because the universe is personal, but because it's precise. And here's where it gets really interesting. As you become more skilled at conscious jumping, you realize that every moment offers multiple timeline options. That conversation with your partner could go 3 different ways depending on which version of yourself you choose to embody. That work project could unfold in completely different directions based on the frequency you bring to it. You start living in real-time choice. Not just big life decisions, but micro choices that happen dozens of times per day. Each choice is a timeline selection. Each embodiment is a quantum jump. Life becomes an interactive experience instead of something that happens to you. But with this power comes responsibility. Because when you know you're choosing your reality, you can't blame circumstances anymore. You can't play victim to situations you're unconsciously creating. This level of ownership can feel overwhelming at first, but ultimately it's the most liberating realization possible. You discover that every challenge is actually an invitation to embody a higher frequency. Every obstacle is feedback about where your signal needs refinement. Every seeming setback is just the field showing you what you're still broadcasting unconsciously, so you can make a more conscious choice. The people who struggle with quantum jumping aren't the ones who can't learn the techniques. They're the ones who aren't ready to take full responsibility for their experience. They want the power to change their reality, but not the accountability that comes with being a conscious creator. Real quantum jumpers develop what I call responsibility, the ability to respond consciously instead of reacting automatically. When life presents a challenge, instead of immediately going into problem-solving mode, you pause and ask, what frequency wants to emerge through this experience? Sometimes the answer is patience, sometimes it's courage, sometimes it's compassion or creativity or fierce boundaries. But there's always a frequency that, when embodied authentically, transforms the entire situation from the inside out. This is living as a quantum being in a quantum universe. You're no longer trying to manipulate reality from outside it. You're dancing with it from within, conscious of your role as both observer and participant in the grand experiment of existence. And the most beautiful part? The more you practice this way of being, the more natural it becomes. What once felt impossible becomes inevitable. What once required tremendous effort begins to flow effortlessly. You're not changing the laws of physics. You're finally learning to work with them instead of against them. Your life becomes a masterpiece of conscious choice. Not perfect, but authentic. Not without challenges, but without the victim mentality that makes challenges feel like punishment. Every experience becomes raw material for your continued evolution. This is what awaits you on the other side of this exploration. Not a destination where everything is finally perfect, but a way of traveling that makes every step of the journey meaningful. A way of being that transforms ordinary moments into opportunities for extraordinary growth. So here's my final invitation to you. Stop waiting for permission to live at your full potential. Stop looking for proof that this is possible before you're willing to try it. The proof comes through practice, not the other way around. Start today. Start now. Choose the frequency you want to embody in this moment and breathe it into your cells. Notice how your body responds. Feel how your energy shifts. Pay attention to what becomes possible when you stop defending your limitations and start exploring your potential. And if you're ready to go deeper, if this resonates with something you've always known but perhaps never had language for, I invite you to join this community of conscious explorers. Subscribe not just to collect more information, but to surround yourself with others who are committed to living beyond the boundaries of conventional possibility. Because this journey is easier when you're not walking it alone. When you're surrounded by people who understand that reality is far more flexible than we were taught, who celebrate your expansion instead of trying to pull you back to familiar limitations. Together, we're not just changing our individual lives, we're contributing to a shift in collective consciousness. Every person who learns to navigate reality consciously makes it easier for others to do the same. Your quantum jumps create ripples that extend far beyond what you can see. This is bigger than personal transformation. This is species evolution. And you're not just a witness to it, you're an active participant in the most exciting adventure consciousness has ever undertaken. The question isn't whether quantum jumping is real. The question is whether you're ready to discover what becomes possible when you stop limiting yourself to one timeline and start consciously choosing which reality you want to experience moment by moment. Your future selves are waiting. Your potential timelines are calling. The quantum field is responding to your every thought, every feeling, every choice. What will you choose to broadcast?